March 1942. A test pilot walks away from a brand new fighter aircraft in Buffalo, New York. "I'm not flying that death trap," he declares. It's the fifth refusal that week. The Bell P-39 Airacobra sits gleaming under hangar lights, revolutionary in design, packed with firepower, but American pilots call it the flying coffin. Yet this rejected fighter would become one of World War II's most lethal weapons, just not in American hands. The P-39 Airacobra looked like the future of aerial combat. Its sleek profile featured innovations that would define modern aviation: tricycle landing gear for better ground handling, a car door-style cockpit entry, and a devastating 37mm cannon mounted in the nose. That cannon could punch through armor plate like tissue paper. On paper, Bell Aircraft had created a masterpiece. But pilots saw something engineers couldn't. British test pilots evaluated the P-39 and promptly cancelled their orders. The French never received theirs before their country fell. American pilots took one look at the specifications and requested immediate transfers to anything else. Even Bell's own test pilots were having second thoughts. The rejection was universal and brutal. What made this catastrophic was the timing. America desperately needed fighters. Pearl Harbor was still fresh in everyone's minds. Factories in Buffalo ran 3 shifts, 7 days a week, trying to build enough aircraft to turn the tide against Germany and Japan. Production lines were churning out P-39s at maximum capacity. Workers riveted together airframes, installed engines, and mounted weapon systems with precision and care. Yet hundreds of completed fighters sat in storage fields across the country, gathering dust rows upon rows of unwanted aircraft that nobody would fly. The program should have been cancelled. Any rational procurement system would have shut down production and retooled for something more promising, but rationality had little place in wartime America. Stopping production meant losing months, perhaps years. So the factories kept running, building fighters that their own military refused to use. The question haunting everyone was simple. What do you do with thousands of state-of-the-art fighters that your own pilots called death traps? But what those pilots feared most about this aircraft would prove even more shocking when it reached the battlefield. The P-39's problems weren't immediately visible. The aircraft looked modern and capable, but the moment pilots climbed into the cockpit and fired up the Allison engine, reality set in. That revolutionary design came with revolutionary problems that would prove nearly fatal. Bell's engineers had made a bold choice, moving the Allison V-1710 engine behind the pilot. This created perfect weight distribution and opened space in the nose for that massive 37mm cannon. A long drive shaft ran beneath the cockpit floor, connecting the engine to the propeller through a complex series of gears and bearings. In theory, it was brilliant. In practice, it was terrifying. That drive shaft created vibrations that rattled through the entire aircraft. Pilots described it as sitting on top of a washing machine running at full speed. Precision flying became nearly impossible, but the vibrations were just the beginning. The engine placement meant that any mechanical failure sent metal fragments and flames directly toward the cockpit. In conventional fighters, engine problems happened in front of you where you could see them coming. In the P-39, they happened behind you, often with no warning until fire started licking at your back. Colonel Bruce Holloway's evaluation in early 1942 was scathing. The aircraft is fundamentally unsuited for the high-altitude interception role for which it was designed. Its ceiling is inadequate, its rate of climb is poor above 10,000 feet, and its handling characteristics at altitude are dangerous. I cannot in good conscience recommend this aircraft for combat operations against the Luftwaffe. The most damning flaw became apparent during climb tests. The Allison engine, powerful at sea level, choked and wheezed above 12,000 feet. This wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. German Messerschmitt Bf-109s cruised comfortably at 25,000 feet. Japanese Zeros operated even higher. A P-39 pilot trying to intercept enemy bombers would struggle for altitude while enemy fighters dove on him from above with every advantage of speed and position. American fighter doctrine emphasized high-altitude bomber escort and interception. For that mission, the P-39 was catastrophically unsuited. Yet someone saw potential in this flying coffin, someone who would change everything we thought we knew about the P-39. By spring 1942, America faced an uncomfortable reality. Hundreds of P-39s were rolling off production lines with nowhere to go. Cancelling production would mean shutting down entire manufacturing operations and starting from scratch. But sending pilots into combat in aircraft they considered death traps was unthinkable. The solution came from an unexpected quarter. The Soviet Union was fighting desperately against the German invasion. Joseph Stalin made it clear through diplomatic channels. He needed fighters, bombers, and tanks in massive quantities immediately. The United States, eager to support its ally and keep the Eastern Front active, began shipping military equipment through the Lend-Lease program. Someone in Washington had an idea. Send the Soviets the fighters nobody else wanted. American officials privately viewed this as disposing of an embarrassing mistake, while technically fulfilling obligations to the Soviets. The thinking was brutally pragmatic. Send them the fighters we can't use, keep the good stuff for ourselves, and hope the Russians can find some use for them. If the P-39s proved as inadequate on the Eastern Front as they had in American hands, at least the losses wouldn't be American pilots. The aircraft began their journey through the most roundabout route imaginable. Loaded onto cargo ships in American ports, they sailed through U-boat-infested waters to Persian Gulf ports. Then they were disassembled and transported overland through Iran into southern Russia. The journey took months. Many aircraft were damaged in transit, some were lost to German submarines. The ones that survived arrived at Soviet air bases in late 1942, battered but functional. Nobody expected much from these cast-off fighters. American intelligence officers who tracked the shipments assumed the Soviets would quickly discover the same flaws that American pilots had found. The P-39 would fail in Soviet service just as it had failed everywhere else. It was only a matter of time before Stalin demanded better equipment, but what happened next would shock the entire aviation world and force America to completely reconsider everything it thought it knew about fighter design. Soviet pilots approached the Airacobra without preconceptions or prejudices. They didn't care about high-altitude performance because they weren't fighting at high altitude. The air war over the Eastern Front was brutal, chaotic, and conducted primarily below 10,000 feet. Exactly where the P-39's Allison engine performed beautifully, German Stuka dive bombers attacked Soviet positions at low level. Soviets struck German tanks at treetop height. The desperate, swirling dogfights that characterized Eastern Front combat happened in thick air, where the P-39's limitations disappeared and its strengths emerged. The first Soviet units to receive the Airacobra treated it as an experiment. Pilots accustomed to flying the Lend-Lease, a wooden fighter that was underpowered and poorly armed, found the P-39 to be a revelation. Senior Lieutenant Grigory Reshkalov was among the first Soviet pilots to fly combat missions in the Airacobra. His assessment in October 1942 revealed a completely different perspective. The American machine is heavy but solid. It does not climb well, but it dives like a stone. The cannon is magnificent. Today I destroyed a Junkers Ju-88 with 3 shells, the entire tail section separated from the fuselage. This aircraft rewards aggression and punishes hesitation. That philosophy became the foundation of Soviet Airacobra tactics. Pilots learned to use the aircraft's strengths while avoiding situations that exposed its weaknesses. They attacked swiftly from advantageous positions, fired that devastating 37mm cannon, and broke away before enemy fighters could respond. The same characteristics that made it unsuitable for American doctrine made it nearly perfect for Soviet operations. The P-39's sturdy construction meant it could absorb battle damage that would have torn apart fragile Soviet fighters. In the low-altitude environment where Soviet pilots operated, the Airacobra was actually faster and more maneuverable than many German fighters. That 37mm cannon could destroy a German bomber with a single, well-placed shot. Soviet pilots weren't trying to escort high-altitude bomber formations. They were fighting a different war entirely. Reports began filtering back to American intelligence agencies by mid-1943. The assessments were initially met with disbelief. Some analysts dismissed them as Soviet propaganda designed to make American allies feel better about sending obsolete equipment, but the evidence was overwhelming. Soviet requests through Lend-Lease channels specifically asked for more P-39s, not P-51 Mustangs, not P-47 Thunderbolts, but more supposedly inadequate Airacobras, and one Soviet pilot would prove just how deadly this rejected fighter could truly become. Alexander Ivanovich Pokrishkin mastered the Airacobra like no other pilot. Born in 1913 in Novosibirsk, he had started the war flying obsolete. We earned 16 fighters, struggling against superior German aircraft with outdated equipment and tactics. When he transitioned to the P-39 in early 1943, he immediately recognized its potential and developed a tactical system specifically designed around its capabilities. Pokrishkin called his approach the Formula for Air Combat, a methodical system emphasizing altitude advantage, speed management, and precise gunnery. His pilots would patrol at medium altitude around 15,000 feet, watching for German formations below. When they spotted targets, they would dive, building tremendous speed, close to point-blank range, fire a brief burst from the 37mm cannon, then climb away using their momentum before enemy fighters could react. The tactic was devastatingly effective. Pokrishkin's personal score began climbing rapidly. 5 kills, then 10, then 20. By the time the Battle of Kursk erupted in July 1943, he was the Soviet Union's leading ace, and his unit flying American-built Airacobras was one of the most effective fighter regiments in the Red Air Force. German pilots began recognizing his radio call sign and warning each other when Pokrishkin was airborne. "Achtung, Pokrishkin!" became a common transmission on German frequencies. The Battle of Kursk demonstrated the P-39's capabilities on a massive scale. German forces launched their final major offensive on the Eastern Front, committing thousands of tanks and aircraft. The Luftwaffe deployed its best units, expecting to achieve air superiority quickly. Instead, they encountered Soviet fighter regiments equipped with P-39s flown by pilots who had spent months perfecting their tactics. During the first week of battle, Pokrishkin's regiment claimed over 100 German aircraft destroyed. His personal tally for July 1943 reached 23 confirmed kills. The German offensive, which had counted on air superiority to protect ground forces, found itself constantly harassed by Soviet fighters that appeared, struck, and vanished before the Luftwaffe could respond effectively. The P-39's heavy armament proved particularly effective against German Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, which were slow and vulnerable to the cannon's devastating firepower. Pokrishkin would end the war with 59 confirmed kills, making him the second highest scoring Allied ace. He was awarded Hero of the Soviet Union 3 times, the highest honor the nation could bestow. In his post-war memoirs, he described the Airacobra as the finest fighter he had ever flown. More than 4,700 P-39s were delivered to the Soviet Union during the war, representing nearly half of all Airacobras produced. These were the same flying coffins that American pilots had refused to fly, yet their impact would reach far beyond the Eastern Front battlefields. The P-39's contradictory reputation forced American aviation designers to absorb hard lessons. The aircraft's failures exposed critical design flaws, but its successes validated certain innovative concepts. Bell aircraft engineers began analyzing combat feedback from Soviet pilots, and what they learned would reshape American aviation for decades. The tricycle landing gear, initially controversial, proved far superior to conventional tail-dragging designs. It provided better visibility during takeoff and landing, reduced ground loop accidents, and made the aircraft easier for inexperienced pilots to handle. Bell began work on an improved version, the P-63 King Cobra, which retained the P-39's basic layout but featured a more powerful engine and improved aerodynamics. Like its predecessor, it would be shipped to the Soviet Union in large numbers and prove highly effective. More importantly, lessons from the P-39's design influenced the next generation of American fighters. The tricycle landing gear became standard on virtually all subsequent American aircraft. The emphasis on pilot visibility, which Bell had pioneered with the P-39's car door-style cockpit entry, became a priority in fighter design. The concept of mounting heavy, slow-firing weapons in the nose, validated by the P-39's success with its 37mm cannon, influenced armament choices for years to come. When Lockheed's Clarence Kelly Johnson began designing America's first operational jet fighter, the P-80 Shooting Star, in 1943, the aircraft that emerged bore striking similarities to the P-39's layout. Both featured tricycle landing gear for improved handling. Both emphasized pilot visibility and ease of maintenance. Both placed the engine behind the pilot, though in the P-80 this was necessitated by jet engine design rather than a desire to mount a nose cannon. The P-39's failure at high altitude forced American engineers to understand the critical importance of engine supercharging and performance across the entire operational envelope. Its success in Soviet hands taught that there was no single definition of an effective fighter aircraft. Mission requirements, operational environment, and tactical doctrine all influenced what made a design successful. The production lines in Buffalo finally shut down in August 1944 after producing 9,584 P-39s in various configurations. Workers who built them probably never knew the full story of how their aircraft performed in combat. By 1950, the P-39 had disappeared almost entirely from military service as jets rendered propeller-driven fighters obsolete. Most Airacobras were scrapped, their aluminum melted down for other uses. The fighter, dismissed as America's worst, contributed more to American aviation development than many celebrated designs. The flying coffin enabled Soviet pilots to achieve legendary status. The failure that should have been cancelled taught lessons that shape the future of aerial combat. Sometimes the machines we reject teach us more than the ones we embrace. The P-39 story proves that success and failure are often separated only by context. If you enjoyed the story of P-39, keep watching Vintage Planes for more legendary revelations of the best forgotten planes.